Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. We are awaiting a ruling from the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals on Donald Trump's audacious and dangerous claim of near total presidential immunity for crimes he committed while in office, while president. In court last week, as you probably remember, Trump's lawyer argued the president should have the power to effectively do whatever he wants, including, for instance, having a political rival assassinated by SEAL Team 6 or selling pardons, and could face no criminal accountability or prosecution unless he was first successfully impeached and convicted.
Could a president order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival? That's an official act in order to SEAL Team 6?
He would have to be and would speedily be, impeached and convicted before the criminal prosecution.
What if he weren't? There would be no criminal prosecution, no criminal liability for that?
Chief Justice's opinion in Marbury against Madison and our constitutional tradition and the plain language of the impeachment judgment clause all clearly presuppose that what the founders were concerned about was not.
I asked you a yes or no question. Could a president who ordered SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival who was not impeached, would he be subject to criminal prosecution?
If he were impeached and convicted first. And
so your answer is no.
My answer is qualified yes.
It was always clear that these weren't particularly sound legal arguments. You could almost hear the resignation in Trump's lawyer's voice as he slowly, against his own will, allowed himself to be backed into the proverbial corner. And that's because these arguments are not rooted, first and foremost, in an interpretation of the law and the Constitution. Rather, they were reverse engineered to arrive at the conclusion Donald Trump is demanding. In case there are any question about that, the ex-president effectively admitted it himself on social media today. In all caps, he ranted, quote, "A president of the United States must have full immunity. Even events that cross the line must fall under total immunity," which sure sounds like a tacit admission of guilt, doesn't it? In a bizarre analogy, he compared himself to a dirty cop. Quote, "You can't stop police from doing the job of strong and effective crime prevention because you want to guard against the occasional rogue cop or bad apple. Sometimes you just have to live with great but slightly imperfect." And then for good measure, he ended with a not-so-subtle message to the 6-3 MAGA majority. Quote, "Hopefully this will be an easy decision. God bless the Supreme Court." Not a lot of subtext there. Don't need some sort of decoder ring. He's saying what he believes, right? This is an authentic expression of Trumpism, as authentic expression of Trumpism as we have ever seen from the ex-president himself. It is what this entire campaign and the movement is centered around now. I mean, this is the singular animating focus, right? Immunity, the concept he is above the law, the nation is under his control, that he will be a dictator on day one of his second term. And for that vision to function, the ex-president needs to craft a legal context in which he cannot be held accountable by the very institutions that he wishes to control. In Trump's view, even when the president, and let's just be clear, not just any president, him, really, right? Like he wouldn't feel this way about Joe Biden or Barack Obama, right? When the president, Donald Trump, does things that are obviously illegal over the line in his own words, as he puts it, he still must have full immunity as long as he has enough cronies on his side to prevent impeachment and conviction in Congress, which Trump knows he has, right? I also think it's particularly notable that Trump compared himself to rogue cops and bad apples, which is to say police officers who break the law. And it's true. Police officers are rarely held legally accountable for official misconduct. The dubious legal doctrine of qualified immunity means that officers can almost never be sued for violating your rights. And fatal shootings by police are rarely prosecuted, even if they are unjustified. But also, there is not blanket criminal immunity for cops. Criminal prosecutions for accountability for police misconduct do happen sometimes, like in perhaps the most famous instance of a police killing in my lifetime.
Former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin sentenced to 22.5 years in prison today for the murder of George Floyd.
Thomas Lane, one of the other former Minneapolis police officers charged in connection with George Floyd's death nearly 2 years ago, has agreed to plead guilty.
J. Alexander King took a plea deal back in October to avoid a state criminal trial. The ex-Minneapolis officer is already serving a federal sentence related to the death.
This sentence of 57 months in prison for Tou Thao, one of the officers involved in George Floyd's death, is significantly higher than even what prosecutors were asking for.
Remember, those 4 officers were acting in their official capacity, no question. When George Floyd was murdered, they were wearing uniforms. They were responding to a call. They were still prosecuted and then convicted. Trump's theory, such as it is that he deserves even less scrutiny than the already threadbare standard we've set for police in this country. Now, a lot of these legal arguments surround, of course, they're about this trial that we're expecting this year, particularly the trial for January 6th, the events leading up to it, the attempt to subvert the constitutional republic. And the subtext for this entire back and forth unfolding before the courts is, will Donald Trump be able to shrug off criminal charges for attempting a coup? That's the question. But it also goes beyond that. I think it's sort of important to internalize this. Avoiding prison may be Trump's most pressing concern, but it is not the only reason he wants total unaccountability as president. He is running for president again, after all. As of now, he appears to be cruising to the Republican nomination. If and when he is nominated, he's got a real shot at retaking the White House. So imagine what he will do if the courts affirm that he cannot ever face justice without an impeachment in the House and a conviction in the Senate first. If his lawyers will admit out loud in front of a judge that Trump cannot face charges for ordering the military to assassinate his opponents, just imagine what Trump is speculating about in private. The judges on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals should be, and I imagine are, thinking long and hard about what affirming Trump's argument would mean for the fate of this country.